All right, we're having an election. Let me just stay for. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Well, I'll mention briefly, as many in this audience probably know, you were advisor to Trump, but you've switched over to the Harris side, and were present as a surrogate at the debate.
So this is going to be easier than the White House press corps, right? Because you could have said I got fired by Trump after 11 days, right?
Well,
that would have been the truth, actually. But yeah, so I worked for the former president for about 9 months. I was on the campaign. We did 71 campaign stops together. Did the convention, hundreds of hours of media advocacy on his behalf. When he won, which none of us thought he was going to win, I was on the executive transition team for the 12 weeks leading up to the inauguration. And then, an ill-fated mistake by me, I took a job with him in July of 2017, and after 11 days got fired. But I know the son of a bitch really well, so we can talk about that. I can tell you what he's going to do and how he thinks, but go ahead.
Well, as someone who advised Trump successfully, maybe you were surprised that he won, and I think you've said you backed the winning candidate in each of the last two presidential elections. This time you're backing Kamala Harris. What does she need to do to win and not do?
Well, I think it's important to provide context. So let's take it back to the 21st of July. It's a Sunday. She's flipping pancakes in her kitchen, and she gets a phone call from the president, President Biden, that he's stepping out, and she's now going to be endorsed by him. And she is not yet the presumptive nominee, so she has to scramble. She's doing three things simultaneously. She's merging her staff with his re-election team. She's got to go out and find the delegates that are the Biden-Harris delegates and get them to commit to her so that there's not this internecine warfare that takes place inside the party. And then the third thing is she has to find a way to make sure that she's respectful to the president. So as evidenced by the convention, if you look at the platform, President Biden's name was left in the platform, and literally everything that was in the platform was his, not hers. And so she had to get the nomination, knock out the other potential contenders. She then had to prepare for the debate. And if you look at the timeline, I think she's done an incredible job in a very short period of time. Now, are there critics? Certainly. People would say, well, she needs to do more interviews, sit with more people. She needs to flesh out her economic agenda. She needs to speak with greater clarity about what she wants to do, what her vision is. And I think all of that is coming, and she started that process. But I think the first thing on her mind from a priority perspective was, I've got to debate Donald Trump, and I have to compare and contrast myself, my personality, and my vision for America. And I think she did a very good job of that, frankly.
Do you think she should do more interviews, get out more?
I do, and I think she is now.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I don't think she's going to do as many interviews as the media would like, because the media would like her to do 6 to 8 interviews a day. She's certainly not going to do that.
Just one with Wall Street Journal would be.
I'll put your name in after this is over. Depending on how the rest of this goes, okay, well, I'll put your name in. I'm kidding.
Thank you very much.
But listen, I'm impressed with her, and I will say something about her that is a very big difference with the president, President Trump, is that she is building a team, and she is building a coalition. And so if you like President Trump in this room, you sort of know what you're getting. You're getting a team of one. It's him. He's in the spotlight. He doesn't like other people speaking for him. He rebuked J.D. Vance during the debate for speaking for him. If cabinet members get out of line, he fires them immediately. He did the same thing on The Apprentice. If there were people starring on The Apprentice with him that were getting too much attention, he fired them. And so what you get with him is a team of one. What you get with her is a coalition. She's gone out to a very broad group of people. And she's asked for help from Republicans and Democrats on debate prep. She asked me to join her at the debate last Tuesday, and she asked me to go into the spin room and advocate on her behalf. I'm a lifelong Republican. she's got the endorsement of Liz and Dick Cheney. I mean, so just imagine this coalition. It's like if Bernie Sanders, Anthony Scaramucci, and Dick Cheney walked into a bar. Okay, that's the, I mean, I don't have the punchline for that, but I'll come up with something hopefully before the election. But the point I'm making is think of the coalition that she's building and think about her willingness to do that. In her debate, not her debate, but in her interview with CNN, she said that she would consider putting Republicans in the cabinet. And that's a big step, I think, in terms of where we are, in terms of the tribalism inside the country, in terms of the fight that we're having, the ideological fight that we're having.
There was a recent poll in Japan that found, speaking from an Asian perspective, I've been Tokyo bureau chief of the Journal for the last 10 years and following Japanese attitudes towards Trump. There was a recent poll that found if Japanese people were voting in the election, 70% would vote for Harris and 20% would vote for Trump. And I think you might get reasonably similar results in other U.S. allies around the world. How do you explain Trump's staying power to an Asian audience?
Well, what I would say about Japan, and I would say this about Europe and parts of Asia, is that these countries have hereditary memory from the specter and the rise of authoritarianism, the specter and rise of fascism. If you think about Japanese history, United Kingdom, Paris, France, etc., if you're raised in France, you visit Normandy Beach. That's one of your field trips. If you're raised in London or in the United Kingdom, you may visit the Churchill War Cabinet, or you may go to the Hiroshima Memorial in Japan. And so what I find about the United States is that in the 1930s, when there was a rise of fascism and there was an American Nazi Party and there were rallies, like a big rally at Madison Square Garden, and these rallies were led by people like Charles Lindbergh or Father Coughlin, they were put down by Franklin Roosevelt. And so we managed to keep our democracy, and we managed to suppress the first America First movement. And so in the United States, we don't have this memory. We don't have this memory of the violence. We don't have this memory of the terror, the lack of certainty and predictability of laws, the legal system. And so if you're in Japan and you see a leader like President Trump and you hear him talking the way he's talking, you're like, okay, that's going to end badly because it ended badly here in my country, or it ended badly in Europe. But in the United States, we shielded the American public from this sort of hereditary memory. And so that's one of the reasons, because people are looking for panaceas. He talks like that sort of a populist leader, that only he can fix it. He'll balance the budget in 4 years. Of course, he ran up the budget, $7.8 trillion. He says he'll stop the Ukrainian war after 24 hours, but we know that means that he's going to cede ground and he's going to cede freedoms to Vladimir Putin, which is, I don't think that's something that we in the West want to do at this perilous time in the world. You know, we have 5.7 billion people in the world living under some form of authoritarianism right now, some sort of dictatorship. And I think it's very important for the United States to be part of the alliance that protects people from the yoke of that type of living. And so, you know, but listen, I was with him. I'll tell a quick story if you don't mind. I was with Jeb Bush, and I joined the Trump campaign after Jeb dropped out of the race. Mm-hmm. And we went 2016. It was May. We were traveling to Albuquerque, New Mexico together. It was the first campaign stop I did with then candidate Trump. And when we got to Albuquerque, there were 9,000 people waiting in the Civic Center. There were 6,000 people outside the Civic Center. I mean, if we had 5 people at a Bush rally and 3 of them were staffers, it was like a miracle. And here was Trump, 16,000 people, flat screens outside the event. And I went into the event. The Secret Service was handing out these day pins. I don't know if you ever travel with a presidential candidate or somebody who has Secret Service protection. They give you a pin for your lapel. I said to the Secret Service, I said, what is this for? He said, well, if the shooting starts, we know you're with us. We won't shoot at you. I was like going like this with the pin, you know, and I, you know, you get very nervous. But I took the pin off, I put it in my pocket, I crossed the security perimeter, and I went into the crowd. And I started to ask people why they were there, what was the reason for them being there. And I'll give you the composite because it's very telling about where America is right now. There were people there, and I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood. My dad was a crane operator, but I always tell people that we had a great living standard. I would never tell anybody I grew up poor. I would never dishonor my dad's work ethic by telling you I grew up poor. We had a nice house. We had a good public school system, and life was very good in that period, 60s, 70s, and 80s in America. But the aspirational working class families that I was a part of had become economically desperational over a 35-year period of time. And so the families I was meeting in New Mexico were explaining that desperation. You know, one gentleman said to me, hey, my dad was in the factory for 30 years. He had a great job, and now he has a pension. I was there for 12 years. I just got laid off. I'm delivering pizza for Domino's, and I'm working at Lowe's, the home improvement center. And Anthony, you think you're in New Mexico, but you know where New Mexico would be? Okay, that would be Mexico, because that's where the factory moved. And I think you know this, and the Journal always reports about this. We lost 65,000 factories in the United States since the signing and the ratification of NAFTA in 1993. So 31 years, 65,000 factories, a hollowing out of these towns that Mr. Trump was descending into in 2016. And he was providing advocacy. He was providing a voice. Again, if you like him or dislike him, that's why people are clinging to him. They see him as a wrecking ball. He's sort of an orange wrecking ball that will smash into the system, and he'll bring down the system that's not working for them. And so the great irony of this, of course, is that Biden wins. Biden is from these people as well. He grew up in Wilkes-Barre in Scranton, Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, which is a coal mining town. And he starts a legislative agenda that's actually quite effective. He's reshoring manufacturing. He passes the Inflation Reduction Act, which is effectively an infrastructure bill, which is rebuilding bridges, roads, and tunnels in the United States, lowering the cost of transit of goods. He's providing, through the CHIPS Act, the rebuild of microprocessor foundries in the United States. And there are many different things that he's doing. And lo and behold, wages are up for middle and lower middle income people. But the president's quite old, to be very honest about this, and he's not great at articulating the success of his legislative agenda. And of course, we've got inflation looming over not just the United States, but most of the industrialized world. And they haven't really done a good job of explaining that. And of course, you work for the Journal, so you know that inflation is situational. And you know that inflation was inducted from a combination of monetary policy and fiscal policy during COVID at a time where the supply chain broke. Lots of money goes into the system to protect people. Less goods are in the system because of the break in the supply chain, and you get the inflation. And of course, that's situational, but we have a way of personalizing these things on our politicians. And, you know, the Biden administration hasn't done a great job of explaining that inflation actually started during the Trump administration. Again, not Donald Trump's fault, not anybody's fault, but just a byproduct of all of us living in COVID and decisions that were made to protect and help people during COVID. And so she has to get out there. She has to explain that. And I think she will. And you guys are probably looking at the polls. I unfortunately probably look at them too much. But she is tracking nicely in the polls right now. And I would also tell you that the polls, in my opinion, are factoring in the underpolling for Donald Trump, whether it's the CNN poll, the Marist poll, the New York Times poll. They're building in the underpolling that they experienced in 16 and 20. And if you look at those poll numbers, she's doing quite well. She's +6 with likely voters. She's anywhere to +3, +4 in Pennsylvania. She needs to win Pennsylvania. And so one would argue, yes, she's got to get out to see the media more, but if you think about where she was on July 21st and where she is here in the middle of September, I think I would give her an A+ in terms of her execution.
What about, you talked about factories moving to Mexico. Many of them move to this part of the world as well, whether it be China or Southeast Asia. what is the next? What should the next, in your opinion, if you're hired an economic advisor to the next president, maybe Donald Trump asks you to come back, or perhaps Kamala Harris asks you for your advice about?
Well, I mean, I just want to say that my wife hates Donald Trump almost as much as Melania hates him, and I mean, and that's like way up here. So there'd be no chance of me going back. I'm running for re-election in my marriage, and so it could be on like a one-day term, as for all I know. So that'll never happen. But
let's say Kamala Harris,
whoever wins, to me, I think there are three things that we need to do, and I'm not saying either of these political leaders will be willing to do these things, but I think there are three things. I think number one, we have to strengthen our alliances and move towards our alliances, not away from them. That would include our alliances here in the Indo-Pacific. It would include what we're doing with NATO. We need to strengthen them. And I think that would send a very big message to the world that America is committed to peace and long-term prosperity for our trading partners and for the cause of freedom around the world. So that's number one. Mr. Trump wants to go towards isolationism. Don't go by me, just read the Condoleezza Rice piece in Foreign Affairs magazine, which was published last week about the perils of isolationism. So number one, we have to send a very resonating message to people that America is here to be part of that process of keeping people free and prosperous. The second thing is we have to address the looming debt crisis in the United States. It's not upon us today. It may not be upon us tomorrow. Certainly if Jeremy gets his stable coin legislation passed, that will strengthen the U.S. dollar and it will fortify dollar supremacy around the world. But when you are spending over $1 trillion of tax receipts on interest payments and you're looking at $1 to $2 trillion deficits a year, we have to do something about that. And we can fix that, by the way, but it would take 15 or 20 years. And so I submit to everybody rhetorically, what political leader do you know in the United States that's offering a 10 or 20-year plan to right-size the deficit, get the entitlements under control, et cetera? And somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to explain to the American people how this could be fixed. It's not going to happen in 2 years, not 4 years, but we can fix it. And since this is a short conversation, I won't go into detail how we can do it, but we can do it. And then the third thing, which I think is very, very important, is we have to figure out how to redo the tax code to create more economic incentives for growth in the blue states. I think the state and local income tax deduction limitation that the Trump administration put in December of 2017 has actually hurt the overall economy. And I'll explain this briefly. If you really study the United States, it's an immigration story. The immigrants come into the port cities. They typically come in quite poor. You need safety nets in the port cities. That would include the Northeast and the West Coast of the United States. And a result of which it was very wise to allow for the state income taxes to be deducted from the federal income taxes. And so you can get people like Sergey Brin into the country. He comes in penniless, goes on to make $100 billion and helps to create a company like Google. And so the country needs to restate its love affair with immigration. It's got to fix the immigration problem. I don't like the demonization of the immigrants. I think the fight really started with me and Trump when he was telling congresswomen to go back to the countries they originally came from. I mean, that's American nativism. They said that to my Italian-American grandmother 100 years ago. It broke her heart when they said that to her. That's not what we stand for. That's a very un-American thing to say to people, particularly when Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, said that the United States was the last best hope for mankind, and it was a beacon of freedom. So we have to restate the immigration love affair, and we have to fix the tax code to support that demographic growth. Because remember, in the West, and this is one thing I agree with Elon Musk about, is that we need population growth. And in a place like the United States, you get it through immigration. So those are the three things.
It sounds like you might be interested in running for, just the way you're talking,
There's
sounds like you...
I
also have the home vote.
There is no way that I'm running for office. I mean, it's not even, it's not even it's no way. I mean, in addition to other things, my wife probably believes in castration on top of everything else. It's just, that was. Let me say this to you, and I'll say this. I'll say this in a very heartfelt way. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood. I went to a couple of great schools. I built a couple of successful businesses. When I got asked to work for the American president, I wanted to do that. Why? Okay? In the idealistic sense, I wanted to serve the country. But in the real puerile sense, in the ego-based, pride-based sense, I wanted to do that because it was fitting my personal narrative. And I did something that's very, very dangerous to do, whether it's in your personal relationships, your career, or as an investor. And I know there's a lot of investors in the room. When you put your pride and ego into your decision making, you make colossally disastrous decisions. And so I won't name this person, but a mentor of mine, he's about 10 or 12 years older than me. He was offered a very big job in that administration. He spent some time thinking about it, and he withdrew his name. And I said, why did you withdraw your name? He said, well, I spent enough time with Mr. Trump to know that our personalities were not going to mesh in that environment, and therefore I dropped my pride and I dropped my ego, and I withdrew myself. I didn't do that. I went towards the situation and not away from the situation. And I share that with you today as a cautionary tale for yourselves, because it was a very painful period of time in my career. It's something that I'm glad I did with hindsight, because perhaps I wouldn't be here speaking to you guys if I didn't do it. But the flip side of it was a pride-based and an ego-based decision, and it wasn't grounded in what it needed to be to make a decision like that. So just remember that when you're making decisions. Take your pride and your ego out of the decision-making. But no, I don't want to be anywhere near the politics, but I love talking about it, of course. And I have a fun podcast that I do with a woman named Katty Kay, which we talk about this stuff. And if the vice president asked me for help, I would be there for her and help her in a advisory way.
We'll come to questions in just a moment. You mentioned your high school and the great schools you went to. It turns out we have someone, one of my close colleagues, Yumiko Ono, one of our Asia editors, was a couple years behind you at Schreiber High School.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
And
it's a good place to go to school.
Elected to student council president, as she remembers it.
That was my last elective office, actually. Yeah.
As she remembers it, it may have been a different...
I was trying to get into college. It wasn't really a politically motivated thing.
Well, she says that maybe you or another student body council president promised to fix the doorknob, the broken doorknob in the cafeteria.
Yeah, that was me.
That was you?
Yeah, I fixed it.
And you fixed it.
I did.
And she's very thankful to you for that.
I planted 40 trees on that campus, and the sign was actually falling down. I was a little bit like, and I loved him, by the way. I mean, he's totally nuts now, but I work for Mayor Giuliani, and one of the things you have to do when you're in a job like that is you have to fix things. You fix potholes. You make sure that the mayor was great at what we used to call the broken windows. We would go into the neighborhoods and make sure that everything was fixed, which would send a message to people that we weren't going to accept lawlessness in the area, But I fixed the Schreiber High School sign, actually. I don't know if she would remember that, but...
Yeah. So the sign itself was broken, or the words on the sign?
Yeah, there were like 3 or 4 letters that fallen off the sign. It was driving me crazy, so I went out and I got guys up there to fix it. That's 40 years ago, but anyway.
Who's counting?
I do live in the neighborhood, though, so I do drive up there to make sure the sign is still okay, by the way, so...
That's fantastic. So let me open it up for questions. Anyone in the audience? We're in the first.
Thanks so much, and love your podcast. A lot of our I'm American, you can tell. A lot of my international friends love it. Wanted to ask you this. So you articulate very well the message that Kamala Harris would have to say in terms of economics, but how do you actually get that to resonate? Do we need a charismatic personality akin to Trump? Not that I'm not a Trump fan, but do you need that on the other side to get that message out? Because I worry that even with the most articulate and well-honed message on economics, what does it take to actually reach some of those families that you talked about?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure everybody heard the question because it was on the mic, so I won't repeat the question. But I think it's an excellent question, and I'm going to answer it the way the campaign would answer it. And so the first thing I would say to you is that Joe Biden, not a lot of charisma. Donald Trump has a variant of charisma. Some could call it malignant charisma in some ways because it's attention-getting more than it is something that you embrace. So people that are voting for him, if you exit poll them or you ask them, is he a good guy? 80% of the people say, no, he's not a good guy, but he's my bad guy. Do you see what I mean? So there's a malignant charisma to Trump's personality. Joe Biden, let's stipulate, doesn't have a lot of charisma, but there was a comparison and contrast where he provided something that was more stable and more predictable, and so the American people went in that direction. Again, the popular vote was 8.5 million, but the swing state vote was only 40 or 50,000, so it was a very close election. But what the Harris team would say to you is that she doesn't need the charisma as much as she needs the turnout, because this is a turnout election. If you look at the polling data, there's very few people that are undecided. Yes, there are some, but it's very, very few. And this is a base turnout election. And Trump knows this as well, which is why he picked J.D. Vance. He didn't go with a Nikki Haley or somebody else because he's really trying to turn out the core of his base in size, and that's why he's blowing on various whistles, racial, anti-immigration, misogyny, et cetera. Those are whistles that he thinks are effective for his base. She's looking at it from a different perspective. She's got more registrants on the Democratic side, and she thinks she can make a broad appeal to those independents. She's got more money than him, and she's got more field offices. As an example, she's got 24 field offices in Pennsylvania. He only has 12. And so she's looking at it as this is a ground game, grind it out to get the results in the swing states and beat him. She doesn't have the quote-unquote charisma that you're asking about, but they think that they can beat him anyway despite that. And so we'll have to see if that happens. But there's an expression that my grandmother used to say, which I'll share with you. You can't put into somebody what God left out. I mean, I would love to be 6'3", but it's only in my dreams. You know what I mean? It's just not happening. Okay, and so she has to take what she's good at, and she's got to take who she is, and she's got to make that work for her. And one thing that she's doing, which I give her a lot of credit for, is she is expanding that tent. You would be so impressed with the number of people that she has called that would be outside her core base that she's looking to. Like when I was called to go down to Philadelphia on Sunday night, I got a phone call. Could you please come down to Philadelphia and go to the spin room on behalf of the campaign? And I was saying to myself, okay, that's an unnatural call. Trump is not making that call to a liberal Democrat. I'm a lifelong Republican. And so I admire her for that, and that may be enough to win the election. But you're not going to see somebody that's charismatic, I think, in the way that you're describing it.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. I'm sure there are many other questions in the audience,
good.
but thank you so much, Anthony.
All right,
for
appreciate
coming.
being here. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.